Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for May 14th, 2021, recorded on 4 p.m. Eastern Time. This is the last off-season discussion, and tomorrow we are going to be switching to the regular Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. We'll get to that here in a moment. Taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic and part of the Eastern Pacific Basin, not too much happening out there right now. One area of disturbed weather right now sitting south really of Panama, and this area will be working along the intertropical convergence zone, which is roughly in this area here. No real threat there for this to go on to develop. And in the Atlantic Basin, we are starting to monitor the potential for an early season bloomer here somewhere within this general vicinity over the next several days. A stalled cold front, this kind of stalled front is located around South Florida, and it's not really going to be progressing much further. And along this edge with frontalysis, which is a dying cold front, a dying front, we will see that there could be some genesis of a tropical or subtropical cyclone somewhere in this vicinity over the next several days. And we'll get to that here in just a minute. But right now, nothing to be concerned about. But early season activity generally happens around this time. So it's not certainly uncommon over the past 6 or so years to have this type of thing happen. Across the rest of the tropical Atlantic, everything else remains quiet at the moment, as it should. Now, taking a look at sea surface temperature anomalies for yesterday, May the 13th, and we have some interesting things to begin to talk about today. First of all, the lack of La Nina. La Nina has officially come to an end across the Atlantic, or across the Eastern Pacific Basin, rather, not the Atlantic. But the La Nina has faded, and we are gradually seeing conditions now begin to move into a neutral phase. And what this generally means is that we will continue to see the presence of warming out across the equatorial Pacific, mainly the Nino 3-4 index, which is this area through here. This area will continue to warm ever so slightly and become at a kind of a neutral phase. And you can kind of see where this grayish line is here. This is indicative of kind of equal temperature anomalies. So it's not skewed one way or another. It is exactly normal for this time of the year. And we've seen that gradually transition from cool to neutral, and that's what's likely to continue to happen across this area throughout the entirety of the remainder of this year, rather. Now, across the Atlantic Basin, we've continued to see a very stout warming process across the subtropical Atlantic here, which means higher than normal pressures will be likely out across this area. Now, as we head in towards summer, and we've already begun to discuss some of this, that as we head towards summer, we are likely to see this warm pool of water begin to slowly transition southward. And this southward moving air and the southward moving environment is likely to create a warming pattern in the Atlantic main development region. So this area should become warmer, and as it becomes warmer, we will likely see a transition more closely tied into a phase one Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, the AMO, the AMO phase. And that is, something that we'll have to continue to monitor as we progress through the next several weeks and months. And out across the Gulf of Mexico region here, the Gulf of Mexico is pretty much above average. And again, the Gulf of Mexico is always going to be warm enough to support intense hurricanes by the peak of the hurricane season. So don't get too caught up in that fact entirely. The Nino 3-4 index, the CDAS methodology on the sea surface temperatures here coming from tropicaltidbits.com. Again, we are 0.143 degrees below average today, but you can definitely see where we peaked just above average. And again, mainly our trend over the last several days has been, or last several months has kind of been like this. And you can kind of see where we kind of ended up something like that, and we're kind of now plateauing at that neutral phase. And again, whether or not this surges towards a warm neutral or a cool neutral is going to kind of depend greatly and going to matter a lot in terms of how this hurricane season actually evolves. Now, the likelihood of seeing a significant El Nino event is very unlikely. And in fact, if we go to the probabilistics for early May, Phil Clockspot kind of highlighted August, September, and October. This is the peak of the upcoming hurricane season. And El Nino probabilities are only at an 8% probability, where neutral is about at a 49% probability. And you can actually see that it is greater than 50% that we jump back in towards a La Nina by November, December, and January of this upcoming year into the beginning of 2022. So it's very important that we kind of pay close attention to this because, again, this neutral, whether it's cool neutral or warm neutral, does have some impacts in terms of the upcoming hurricane season at hand. And again, the Eastern Pacific season starts tomorrow. The Atlantic season, while technically not until June 1st, the outlooks begin tomorrow as well at 2 a.m. So when the Atlantic or when the Eastern Pacific season begins tomorrow at 2 a.m., so does the Atlantic basin. And again, that is when the outlooks will begin to be issued regularly, as we are used to during the hurricane season, which typically runs from June 1st to November 30th. Now, moving on to the other topic of discussion, what may be trying to develop out across the Western Gulf of Mexico, or really the Eastern Gulf of Mexico, or the Western Atlantic Basin. And this is the GFS forecast, the 850 millibar vorticity here. Again, the higher up you go in the scale, the higher cyclonic vorticity you have, generally speaking. Now, we'll kind of run this out. This is 48 hours from now. This is by 12Z Sunday. And this is, again, looking at what we might have here. We have a front that is died, a kind of a stalled front that is across this area. And this has generated some surface vorticity out here, out across the Western Atlantic Basin, but a very broad, large-scale system. Now, it does take some time to consolidate, but this generally looks more like an open trough than it does an actual tropical or subtropical disturbance. And if we prop over to the relative humidity, again, you can kind of see this large fetch of dry air that is around here. So again, not really likely to see anything develop out of that. But that's not our main kind of key here. We'll keep moving forward. And this is kind of where things start to get interesting. This is beyond 5 days from now, but you can kind of see where we're heading. We kind of get this stalled front again, and here we go. We have some area of disturbance here and another area of disturbance right here. Now, this is again beyond 5 days, so I have a lot of questions to the validity of this. And as we'll see, via other models don't necessarily support this at all. But the relative humidity, again, this could maybe be some subtropical disturbance, and then we might actually see a tropical disturbance ending up in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, this is at 180 hours out from now. The validity of that is subject to intense scrutiny because we just don't know yet. And again, this is going to play a lot of, part in this upcoming hurricane season. We're going to ask you to do your part. Model guidance beyond 5 days is generally very unreliable. It can be reliable, but when forecasting tropical weather and tropical disturbances and whether or not a disturbance may or may not form, it's very sensitive. And again, the GFS does have a little bit of a reputation for fantasy hurricanes and tropical cyclones, and this may just be a result of a pattern flip that the GFS is suggesting and kind of sniffing out, or this might just actually be something that is phony and probably won't happen. And we can kind of take a look at the European. This is the 12Z run of the European model. And for instance, again, it virtually shows absolutely nothing. Big ridge of high pressure out across here, big, dominant ridge, kind of pumping a lot of tropical moisture in for sure. Deep return flow pattern setting up across the plains here, maybe a good severe weather threat. But tropical weather, not really going to be seeing anything in that terms. And for instance, here, even on the the ECMWF ensembles, we only pick out actually one ensemble member here, and we got to go deeper into the pattern to actually find another that is fairly weak. So not really anticipating that anything very significant happens here. And again, this is 216 hours out, so this is further out in time than really what I like to look at here. So the model guidance, again, it is suggesting that there may be some possibilities here. But if we look here at the shear values, again, just kind of looking further out in time, it doesn't really look all that impressive. Again, we have a large kind of subtropical ridge, out across here, subtropical jet out across there. Kind of this other ridge out across here, this kind of upper level anticyclone. So there will be some ventilation initially, but this big kind of area of flow is just going to prevent anything in a vortex average sounding. Just kind of across this area does represent the fact that we will have shear. You can see a lot of shear changing, especially up above about 500, about 500 millibars or so. So that definitely is representative of questionable, definitely questions the validity of the model at this point, but we will just have to kind of wait and see. Again, this is all beyond 5 days, so I kind of question the validity of this by kind of a long shot. For the upcoming hurricane numbers, again, we will be releasing those later today, so look towards our community post to be releasing those here within about the next about 2.5 hours or so, give or take. We're going to look at ours, just kind of finalize everything, and we'll put them in the community discussion. So if you guys are going to look for that, they will be there. They will also be on my Patreon page. Again, kind of haven't been advertising that as much, but if you guys are familiar with my Patreon, go to the About Me section, and you guys can find all of that information there. All right. With that being said, hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon, evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I'll talk to you guys again some more early next week.